got a wealth of knowledge, lots of experience in this area. So over to you, Mark, whenever you're ready. Thanks.
Thanks, Natalie, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Turpin. Some of you have been in some of my sessions before, I think, and I work as a coach, learning consultant, part-time lecturer, mediator, and I love the work that I do with people. I work with all kinds of different people every day, which is lots of fun, and I learn a lot from that. And today our theme is going to be emotional intelligence, sometimes known as EQ, emotional quotient, and distinguishes itself from IQ, or intelligence quotient. Maybe emotional intelligence is also a form of intelligence. That's sometimes debated, but we can look at it and we can see. So we're going to work until around 2:30. And what I'm going to do in the first half of our meeting today is to introduce the idea of emotional intelligence, what it is and why it's important. And then in the second half of our session, I'm going to share with you an inventory which will enable you, because we'll arrange for it to be accessible for you, enable you to measure your own emotional intelligence and see if there are some things that you want to work on. I thought I'd start with a little story, which is from the time of the Industrial Revolution. And there was a factory in the UK where the boiler broke down and it was holding up all the production in the factory. So the owner of the factory called a guy to come diagnose and fix the problem. So this guy arrives at the factory with his little toolkit, and he walks around the boiler for a minute or two, looking at it, and then he stops, puts down his bag, and he pulls out a hammer. And some of you may have heard this before, so I'm sorry if it's repeating something for you. Pulls out a hammer and he taps the boiler one specific place, and it springs into action immediately. The owner is standing there and says, "Wow, that's incredible. What do I owe you?" So the guy says, £150. The owner is a bit taken aback, and he says, £150? And why should I give you £150 for this? Can you break down your costs? So the chap says, yes. Call out fee, walking around the boiler and tapping it with my hammer, £1. The owner of the factory says, and what's the other £149 for? The guy says, knowing where to hit it. Knowing where to hit it. So that's an example of IQ, the intelligence that is required sometimes in the world of work, just knowing how to do something. And for 100 or so years after the Industrial Revolution, what was needed in the world of work was IQ, knowing how to do something. Nowadays, it's different because we do need IQ, we do need to know how to do things. But increasingly in the world of work, we also need the EQ, the emotional intelligence, which is knowing how to connect and relate to the people around us. So not just the IQ side of knowing how to do things, but also knowing how to connect and relate to the people around us, which is the emotional intelligence. And there are many reasons why this is important, but I think part of it is that nowadays, to solve problems at work, to innovate, to be creative, and ultimately to be productive, it's not just enough to know how to do something, but we also have to be able to connect with people around us in the teams that we are in, and in the companies and businesses that we are in, we have to be able to connect with other people to do the things that need to be done. So that's the relational component. And the days when in the past at work we could just rock up with ourselves and be given a spanner to do our day's work, those days are over. Now it's also about how we connect with the people around us to be effective in what we have to do. There are very few tasks anymore that can simply be done on our own. We have to be able to be connected with the people around us. And they realize nowadays that actually people who have higher levels of emotional intelligence, because they can measure it, are generally happier, healthier, more connected, and lead more successful lives and careers. So emotional intelligence is now an important part of what we have to be able to demonstrate at work, to be connected and to be happier and more successful in our careers. So there is a lot of attention nowadays on building higher levels of emotional intelligence. The EQ, emotional intelligence term, was first explored in academic papers in the 1960s, but it was really popularized by Daniel Goleman in a book that he wrote called Emotional Intelligence in 1995. So that's where it comes from. But over the last 30 years, there have been probably hundreds of other papers and books and talks and seminars given on the theme of emotional intelligence. So that's really just by way of introduction to the idea. It's really an individual set of characteristics, behaviors, and traits that we can all demonstrate ourselves in the world of work. But it contributes to a wider sense of social capital in a country, the extent to which people are connected and trust each other. And countries with higher levels of social capital, which tend to be Scandinavia, Netherlands, and some other countries, also perform economically better than countries where levels of trust and social capital are low. So building emotional intelligence ourselves as individuals is also a contribution to building a more trusting, connected nation. I just thought I'd pause there for a minute and welcome the people who've just joined and ask if anyone has any immediate questions about this idea of emotional intelligence. Don't be shy and please ask questions. Just wave your hand and I'll come to you. Okay, I think you're probably all comfortable so far. So if we start breaking it down then a little bit, the idea of emotional intelligence, it's really, we're looking at two broad areas. One is to do with how you see yourself in terms of connecting with other people. So what do you see and do about yourself? That is in terms of how you connect with people around you. And the second part is really how you see others and how you are responding to them and how they are behaving. So it's looking both at yourself and also looking at the people around you. And Daniel Goleman essentially breaks it down into 5 broad areas altogether. So I'll go through these briefly with you. The first area, which is to do with yourself, is self-awareness. Your ability to read and understand the impact of your own emotions on your work performance and how you are in the workplace. So it's really understanding your own emotional well-being. Your ability to see how that might impact on people around you and on your workplace relationships. The extent to which you demonstrate a sense of self-worth and well-being in the workplace. And knowing some of your own strengths and maybe sometimes some areas that you can improve in terms of how you connect and relate with other people. So with this self-awareness idea, you're looking inwards very much. The second, excuse me, the second area where we are looking inwards is in what we call self-management. Self-management is your level of emotional self-control, how you manage yourself, maybe when you're under stress or if you're being criticized or something like that. And the extent to which you remain accountable for your own personal performance, rather than maybe blaming other people for things when they go wrong. And your ability to take calculated risks sometimes and to say, I'm going to step into trying this or doing this. All these points, by the way, are in the inventory that I'll share with you, so you don't have to take detailed notes. And the third area is in terms of self-motivation. And again, we're still looking inwards. Your ability to set your own goals for your life and for your work, to take responsibility for achieving those. Your ability to identify with the goals of the organization. How can you step into supporting what the organization is trying to achieve? And your ability to adapt to change as well. Sorry. Your ability to adapt to change is also important. This is how you motivate and drive yourself. So these three broad areas, self-awareness, self-management, and motivation, are all areas in which you are looking inwards in terms of your own emotional well-being and how you cope with life and work. And then there are two broad areas that Goleman identifies also as being part of emotional intelligence, which are more connected with your relationship with other people then. The first one they call empathy. Empathy is when you are able to read the dynamics around you and cope with those social, sometimes political dynamics. Your ability to be sensitive to issues of diversity is an important part of empathy. Dealing honestly with diversity issues. And to be able to anticipate and read the needs of other people. So again, now we're looking at the relationship with others around us. This is all to do with the empathy characteristic. And then there's a very broad area, what they call social skills. Your ability to motivate others, to build alliances where necessary, to communicate effectively with other people, be able to manage conflict, be able to give people constructive and useful feedback, and provide leadership. So this is really in terms of what Goleman calls the social skills area, where you're stepping out into the different things you do to effectively manage the workplace around you. And emotional intelligence, I guess, then is very broadly this whole set of characteristics that I've taken you through. The inward-looking ones, I'll give you those again. self-awareness, self-management and motivation. And then the more outward focused aspects, empathy with others and with diversity and with the teams around you, and the social skills to be effective in managing those relationships with other people. So very broadly, this is what emotional intelligence is about. And obviously, we can't all be perfect at all of them all the time. So emotional intelligence is something for us to be conscious of, and particularly to think about how we want to grow and develop our own emotional intelligence. It becomes a set of characteristics that are seen increasingly as important for leaders. So leaders can often have the IQ that is needed to do effectively the job that they are required to do, but may sometimes be lacking in some aspects of EQ. So not always having the best interpersonal relationships with the people around them. And you'll all be aware of leaders sometimes who rise to high levels in the corporate system, but are unapproachable, unfriendly, don't connect with you or the people around you, or even the other people around them. So nowadays, more and more, in recruiting people for senior positions in the business world, we're looking for people who have higher levels of EQ, emotional intelligence. And that is what is increasingly going to distinguish us from other people who may be competing for the same positions, is if we are really strong on the emotional intelligence side of things. That's going to help. Other people will have the same degrees and the same qualifications that you might have, but they may not have the emotional intelligence that you can develop. So this is important for your own career development and your own career management as well, to think about how you need to develop and grow your own emotional intelligence. So, questions? Does it make sense? Do you recognize the things I'm talking about? No wonder you're happy, you connect with it.
We've got one thumbs up. Two
Yeah.
thumbs up. There we go.
No wonder, does it make sense to you? You're quiet. Napo?
Yes, so far so good with me. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Still
Do
following
you
very well.
recognize some of these characteristics?
Yes, 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 yes.
Okay. Tariro? You get it. Spongisipo, yes, you've got a thumbs up as well from you. Okay. I'm just checking the chat as well. You can also put things into the chat if you want. No wonder you get it. That's great. So what do we do with this? What do we do with this? And I suppose one of the things that I would say is really important to know your own emotional intelligence is to be able to actually measure it and to have probably someone who can help you or support you by giving you some feedback in terms of how you can strengthen and improve areas of emotional intelligence. And this is sometimes where a coach or a mentor can support you, but it's really good to have a trusted colleague, someone who you work with, who can see your work on a daily basis, who can give you feedback and give you some support in terms of strengthening your emotional intelligence. And yeah, also even just having that trust or finding that trusted colleague can be a good step in itself in terms of strengthening your emotional intelligence. So having someone to work with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you the inventory that we sometimes use to measure to measure emotional intelligence. So I'm just going to try and share the screen here. Okay, so I hope you can see this now. I think you can. And these are, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see? I just want to make sure, I hope everybody can see the screen.
Yes, all good. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, okay, good. So this is the emotional intelligence inventory that you can use to explore and develop your own emotional intelligence. So I'm going to take you through it. The first area that I spoke about earlier is your own self-awareness. So I'm not going to read the whole thing here, but you'll see there are 4 statements there. And what you can do, and I'll explain to you how you can do it later, is rate each one. Sorry, you can rate each one on a scale of 1 to 10. So the first statement, my ability to read and understand the impact of my emotions on my work performance. So you can rate that on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is low and 10 would be obviously very high. So on each of these points, you can rate them on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is low and 10 is high, and you might give yourself a 6 or 7 or an 8 or somewhere in between for each of these statements. So this is where you can do it for yourself. And you go right down the inventory, the different points that I mentioned. Self-management is the second area. And again, you rate yourself, my level of emotional self-control on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is low and 10 is high, and so on. I think it's fairly straightforward. So you do this all the way through. Motivation is the third area. The fourth area, empathy. And the fifth area, social skills. So what I'd suggest you do, and we'll make this available to you, is you do this for yourself, first of all. And then what you do is you, with a trusted partner, you ask them to complete exactly the same assessment about you, going through exactly the same, all the same points, rating you, they rate you on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of how you do. So this is where you actually get some feedback. Okay, so the 2 areas are you do your own assessment here, and then with a trusted colleague, the partner, you ask them to do it for you. And then, of course, because you've given them the assessment tool, you invite them to also do their own assessment, and then you can be the partner and assess them on exactly the same measures. So each of the 2 of you would then have, excuse me, I've still got a cough as well. Each of you would then have your own assessment and the assessment of your partner, and they would also have their own assessment and the assessment that you provide for them. So you're both doing it for each other. This is why you need a trusted workplace colleague to do it with you. Someone who trusts and who cares about you, and you trust and care about them. So you're going to give the other person honest feedback, and they're going to give honest measures back to you as well. That's the way we do it. Then what you've got, of course, each of you has got your own assessment for each of these measures. And you've also got your partner's assessment of the same measure. So, for example, if you were to take self-awareness A, number one, my ability to read and understand the impact of my emotions on work performance. You might give yourself a 6. Maybe they've given you a 4. So they don't think you're quite as strong in doing that as you might think yourself. And in each of these points, then, you've got 2 numbers, the number that you've given yourself and the number that your partner has given you. Very often they might be similar, but you may find there are some where there's a bigger difference. Either they are rating you much higher than you're rating yourself, or they are rating you maybe a bit lower than you are rating yourself. And those are the ones to focus on, where it seems to be a big difference, because this can point to areas that you might want to work on, be conscious of, and improve. So how am I going to improve, for example, if you take the first one, my ability to read and understand the impact of my emotions on my work performance? Something to be conscious of and to work on. And you may find that going through the whole tool, the whole inventory, there might be 3 or 4 or 5 specific areas where there's a big gap between how you see yourself and how your trusted colleague is seeing you. And those can be areas to work on. And also to get continuing feedback on from your colleague. And you may find that after 2 or 3 months, you might want to do the assessment again and see if there's been any improvement or any change to strengthen and build your emotional intelligence. So I'm just going to stop that there for now and ask if there are questions. This is the emotional intelligence inventory that Daniel Goleman helped to develop. How does it feel? Any questions? You were all so quiet. Akona, you've got a couple of questions. I'm just going to go into the chat. How can I apply emotional intelligence skills to enhance my leadership skills and team performance? That's one question. Is there another one? Secondly, what resources like books do you suggest? Well, yeah, I mean, Daniel Goleman himself, who wrote the emotional intelligence book, that's a primary source to read if you want to go in depth into it. And then applying the emotional intelligence skills. Look, I think the first thing is to recognize that effectiveness at work these days depends almost more than anything else, particularly as you move more and more into leadership positions, on building effective workplace relationships. As a leader, as someone in a team, you may not always be the most highly skilled in terms of the IQ, the intelligence quotient, in terms of what has to be done. But working effectively with other people in the team or as a leader is probably even more important, because we will be unlocking the potential of the people around us by working effectively with them. I don't know if this is making any sense, but the ability to manage those workplace relationships effectively becomes almost the most important skill that you apply as a leader and in your team. And a good example, for instance, is one of the key characteristics, I'd say, is being able to ask good questions of the people around us, knowing what questions to ask, asking good questions of the people around us becomes a key aspect of emotional intelligence because it shows empathy, shows concern, shows interest, connects with the goals of the organization. So I think asking good questions and listening clearly are key mechanisms, if you like, for demonstrating high emotional intelligence. Even here, by the way. So I like your questions very much because it enables us to go into some depth around exactly what is required. Does that help a little bit? Makona, does it make sense to you? I can't see where you are, by the way, on the screen somehow. Anyway, yeah, so I think it's those relational skills that show concern for others and what needs to be done that become critically important. Dion, thank you. Maybe a comment from your side. Realizing early on that EQ skills are learned skills. Yes, I think that's important. And it may be that it's about a combination, this emotional intelligence is a combination of skills, self-awareness, and behaviors. Sorry, skills, self-awareness, and behaviors that you can develop and grow. It's not simply, maybe it's not simply a set of skills, but there's a degree of self-awareness that is required behind how you then behave, which means that it is possible to learn and grow your emotional intelligence. But it's not something that can easily be examined in a business school examination format. It's not taught in the in graduate courses very often. So it is seen as perhaps a little bit nebulous still in some ways. Not an easy thing always to measure. This comes to your point, Nomonde. Is there a framework then that can use at the end to determine the overall percentage of EQ? That is to say, if you fall in this percentage, this is what you can improve. Or after scaling yourself within, for instance, self-improvement, the total percentage will indicate that you need to improve. Yeah, look, I think this is something that becomes a lifetime of work. That we will hardly ever get everything to a 10. I mean, we've got on the inventory that I shared with you, there are about 25, 30 different points that you can measure for yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, and then also get the measures of your partner. That will give you a number, and you can then set targets and decide which particular areas you might want to work on to up that number. So it isn't on a sort of formal percentage level, but you can rate yourself on these scales and then give yourself targets in terms of how you want to improve in terms of the relationship with your colleague over a period of time. It's not hugely scientific because you're depending really just on the view of one other person and your own perception. So it's a little bit anecdotal in that sense, but I think it can give you something really to work on and to structure a way of thinking. And you may find that after a few years, you move to another position, you've got new colleagues, you might want to almost start again and see how they're rating you and how you rate them in a new and different context. But I don't think see it as something which you just complete and it's done and you don't have to work anymore on your emotional intelligence. It's going to be a lifetime of work to monitor yourself and work with colleagues to see how generally you work together. It's something that a particular team might take on to monitor its own emotional intelligence as a team, give itself a number, and how do we want to improve it using the inventory here. Yeah, I think you can see it there. Namonde, does that help a little bit? You get the idea? Yeah. So I think one of the things I would say in terms of the inventory, if you find that under all of the different areas that we look at, self-awareness, self-management, and so on, you find consistently that you are rating yourself very high and you're getting much lower ratings from your colleague, that could be an area for attention and for concern, because it shows that you have a level of self-awareness that is generally much lower than other people are giving you credit for. So that would indicate that you could perhaps do some serious work in terms of improving your emotional intelligence. But generally, I think you will find that the gaps, if there are any, between how you rate yourself and how other people rate you, would not be too high unless you are a very disconnected person, or unless the person you've chosen is just trying to give you very high marks because they like you or something like that. So it's important to discuss the purpose of this inventory with your trusted colleague first, to make sure that you're not just being nice to each other, that you're being honest in terms of the ratings that you give yourself. I think that would be important. And of course, you are going to rate them as well. So it's a trade-off. You're both trying to support each other. So there's a greater incentive to be honest and not just to butter each other up, I think. Don't do it with your manager. Maybe do it with a colleague who works with you, sees your work and sees how you are on a regular daily basis, is a really good way to do it. But I think don't just do it for yourself. Do it with another colleague, because if you just do it for yourself, you may be giving yourself some credit that maybe you don't deserve, or you may be underrating yourself when actually you might be quite strong in some areas according to how somebody else would see you. Yeah. It's a little bit technical in some ways when it comes down to the measurement framework. And it's not, I don't want you to see it as too much just putting you into a box that you're always like this or always like that. It's just based on people's perceptions, but it can be a useful indicator or guide, particularly where you find those differences between how you rate yourself and how somebody else is seeing you. Those could be some areas that you might want to think about and work on. If you find very big differences occurring consistently throughout the inventory, and maybe you are rating yourself much higher than how other people are seeing you, then that may be something that you might take to a coach or mentor and explore with that person how they can encourage you to work on particular areas, or where there may be some particular gaps that you're not effectively coping with or dealing with very well. Yeah. Questions? Thoughts? Comments? Dion, I just wanted to check with you. The point I made earlier is that the combination of emotional intelligence being a combination of skills, behaviors, attitudes. It's not just a set of skills, I guess, in that sense. It's a combination of what you are, what you know, how you connect with people, how you see people around you, how you behave. In a
Yeah, I
very
think,
broad sense, it's a set of competencies, I think.
yeah, I think from my point of view is if you really have the desire to become a better person in terms of your own, leadership skills and you have the desire to improve on your EQ. I mean, you can over time become competent and become better and with the right advice, with the right exposure to other people, and you can you can set goals for yourself, and you over time, and I think definitely it is a lifelong journey that you're going to be on, and you're going to do continuous education and learning, and you will improve. It's not just that you are the talented in EQ or not. I think if you really have the desire deep down, you can become a well-rounded person that people generally like.
Dion, that's a very good way of thinking about it. Thank you. And you're not going to get a certificate ever, for example, in emotional intelligence. There isn't a certificate that says Dion or Nomonde or whoever has got high levels of emotional intelligence, because we're not going to examine you on it or give you marks out of 100 or anything like that, so that you get the certificate. But people will recognize you as having higher or lower levels of emotional intelligence. It comes across as the way you are, as the way you effectively engage, as the way you ask questions. Even in an interview, you can see fairly quickly and easily if you're dealing with somebody who seems to have high levels of emotional intelligence or not. And it's the kind of thing where at the end of an interview, somebody say, yeah, he seems to have all the right skills, but I'm just not quite sure if he's going to be able to effectively engage with our people. Yeah, that's an emotional intelligence pickup that they have found. So it's something that people can see and recognize in you. And that's how they will assess whether you seem to have emotional intelligence at a reasonably high level or not. It's not from an examination certificate or anything like that. So it's much more around a way of being that people are going to be able to identify and recognize. And more, as I say, in those more and more senior leadership positions, it's going to be something that people are looking for. High levels of emotional intelligence.
Yeah, if I can maybe say, I think what will happen is that when you embark on this journey of acquiring these competencies over 10, 15, 20 years, it will show in your results, in your career success. So that's basically how it will measure you as an individual. You'll become more successful financially and socially, and the way you are accepted by the community that you live in, within your family. You over 10, 15, 20 years, you'll become much more successful when you embark on this journey of emotional intelligence. And yeah, it should actually also show in your financial ability on the long run as well. Definitely. I think that's basically, as well, in my own opinion, I think that's where you will see the results. But it is a lifelong journey, and it is a continuous journey, and it is unfortunately sometimes confrontational as well. So you have to, even this document that you're providing, it's in a way confrontational when you ask your colleague to rate you, and you have to realize, or you then get pointed out where your weaknesses are and where you need to work on. And yeah, you have to be happy with being confronted, and not settling for being average. Because if you want to be above average, you need to have higher IQ and IQ as a work in progress. Yeah, I think generally you'll be a happier person over the long run.
Sure. Thanks, Dion. I think the thing about doing the inventory is that it can be when you see that how your partner has assessed you, it can be quite confronting, and you may see some things that you didn't know about, or you're not always so immediately happy to see. So that's again the reason why we do it with a trusted partner or colleague, and you may want even to discuss one or two of their ratings of you with them and say, I see you only gave me a 2 for taking risks. Why is this? Or whatever it is. And they may also want to discuss some of your ratings of them. So it's very much a shared process, and that's why the trusted colleague idea is quite important. And it's, of course, also, you don't necessarily always have to accept every single rating or piece of feedback that somebody else gives you. That's always your own choice. But nonetheless, if they've given you a particular rating, there's probably some reason behind it, and you might want to explore that. If you really feel that they have given you incredibly low ratings throughout or something, and you're not at all happy with how it seems to have worked out, sorry, how it seems to have worked out, you can always, of course, do it with somebody else and get a kind of second opinion, if you like. But generally, you probably will find that the pattern doesn't change particularly in terms of how different people would rate you or rate you on particular aspects of the inventory. And I think the other thing I would say is that, of course, you don't have to work on everything immediately. For instance, if you take under motivation, one of the characteristics is your ability to adapt to change. And you may decide that, look, you've had some bad experiences working with change recently. You don't want to get into working on that for the time being. You're going to hold that for a while and work on some of the other areas for now. So in that sense, as you say, Dion, it could be something that you work on over a period of time to generally improve your levels of emotional intelligence. Yeah. Other questions or thoughts? Tebatse, you're happy? Very good. Do you have any questions? Just checking. Okay, well, listen, what I suggest we do is let's take a short break at this point, until 2 o'clock. I need to get some water for my throat as well. And then let's come back at 2 o'clock, and I'm going to take you in a little bit more detail through the inventory again. And then we'll work out how we're going to get copies for you and give you an opportunity to, in your own time then, assess yourself through the inventory and do the same process with a colleague. So let's take a short break now and reconvene at 2 o'clock, if that's okay.
Perfect. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Okay, thanks everyone. So I just maybe thought we could look at a couple of real world type situations. And then maybe in this we'll respond partly to the question you're asking, Tebetse, as well. So let's look at a situation where someone comes into the office, you're in a team, having a team meeting, it's quite an important team meeting that you're having, and someone comes in to the room and they're obviously in tears or have just been crying or something like that, and they come into the room and you're about to start an important team meeting. How could we effectively respond in a situation like that? I just thought I'd ask that question, see what people think, because this is a classic example where some good emotional intelligence is going to help. Someone comes into the room and they're either still crying or have obviously been crying right up until they come into the room. How should we respond? It's your meeting and it's an important meeting. Any thoughts? There's no right and wrong answer, by the way. But you want to respond with emotional intelligence. Any thoughts?
I just want to check if I understand correctly. So it's your own colleague that is going to be part of this meeting. Maybe it's with an important client, and maybe it is the first meeting with this important client, and now your colleague is supposed to be on this meeting with you, but unfortunately she's not. She's him or her. They're crying and they're not happy, and now you need to deal with the situation. Am I understanding it correctly?
Yeah, it's a challenging situation. Tebetse, you talk about taking some time to acknowledge the person, offering space to deal with it, or maybe asking a colleague to step out with them and see if they can support them in some way, something like that. But just to plow on ahead with the meeting would probably be a mistake, because not everybody in the room is present for the purpose of the meeting. You may be, but the person who came in may not be, and colleagues and people who care for that person also may not be comfortable to proceed straight away. So it's about creating some space, maybe giving the person opportunity to step out for a while and somebody to go with them and support them with whatever they are dealing with is going to be important. But not an easy situation to cope with. Similar kind of distraction could be the person who comes into the office in the morning and has completed the comrades over the weekend, and is talking about it. And this could be a conversation that lasts for half the morning if you just let people talk and gather around and hear all about the comrades' experience. Which is obviously very important for the person. So thinking about how you could deal with a situation like that could also be important. That Musa has just run the comrades, for example, and is telling everybody, what are we going to do? Because the conversation can go on for quite a while about the different aspects of the run and who they met and what happened along the way. So any thoughts about a situation like that? Because again, this is about emotional intelligence.
If it's a person, if I can maybe answer, if it's a person.
Sorry, Dion, I can't quite hear you.
Is it better now?
Yeah, that's better. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry if I may. I didn't put my hand up. I just switched my mute button off. So what I would do is I would make time for that person maybe after work. After the first day back at work, maybe in the afternoon. So, we can create a slot for 30 minutes or an hour, and we can actually celebrate with the person, achieving their goal or maybe missing their goal, and then encouraging them to try next year again. So I would schedule a specific time, maybe after the end of the first day back at work.
Yeah.
And then hopefully they will feel that they are everybody is keen to hear about their experience and be happy with them for achieving or not achieving their goal, and encouraging them to try again. That's what I would do.
Yeah, I think so. Making a dedicated time and space where we can celebrate um, or recognize the achievement. Probably don't leave it till after work. You might have to do it the coffee morning or something like that, an hour or two after people arrive, because that person's going to talk about it anyway. So you might want to say, let's get some cake and have a coffee at 11 o'clock and hear all about it. Or perhaps lunchtime. Yeah. So it's about reading the situation. I think probably more than anything else is the emotionally intelligent thing to do in these situations. To say this situation requires this recognition in this way, whatever it is. So yeah, I mean, I was with somebody the other day who just completed the comrades, and the conversation went on for a long time without anybody else being able to step in. So it's something that can be a big deal for people. Yeah. So thinking about situations at work that require some emotional intelligence is important. And we are all confronted with these situations where we celebrate or we are unhappy about something or something has gone wrong, where we need to take a pause somehow and give an opportunity to address the situation. It's not saying that the workplace is a permanent counseling opportunity either, because the work has to get done. The team meeting still has to somehow proceed. And yet we also have to recognize that somebody's very upset about something, and that has to be given its own space to deal with. So I think, yeah, this is to do with the awareness that something is going on or something has happened that needs some attention. Is recognizing in yourself a high degree of emotional intelligence to be able to see these situations and not just to ignore them or assume that they don't have a place in the workplace. They do. We don't leave ourselves outside when we come into the workplace in the morning. We bring everything about who we are and what we do and what happens to us outside the world of work. We bring it into the workplace, and emotional intelligence can recognize that, whilst recognizing also that we've got some work to do. Okay, thanks very much. I'm just going to then go back to the screen, the emotional intelligence inventory. And naturally, what we'll do is I'll email this to you after the session, and then if you can share it with the participants, that would be great.
No problem. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah. So just to repeat, some of you may have missed it right at the beginning. So this is the opportunity to measure on a scale your own emotional intelligence and also the emotional intelligence of a partner that you select from the workplace, a trusted partner. So you do it for yourself and for them, and then they will do their own assessment and then do one of you. And then you can compare these, sit down and compare each of these with the other person. So you have your own assessment and then the assessment the other person does of you, and they likewise have the same. And as you go down, you'll see with each of the statements, each of the categories, there are a number of statements. Under self-awareness, you've got the 4 statements that come here. And what you do is you read that statement, not my number 1, my ability to read and understand the impact of my emotions on my work performance. And then you give yourself a rating from 1 to 10, 1 being low and 10 being high. And you do this for all the different statements that are made here. You rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being low and 10 being high, or anywhere in between. And so you go down and do this for each of the statements here. A to D, social skills. The last one, my ability to lead and support others. On a scale of 1 to 10, you might give yourself a 7 or something. 1 being low and 10 being high. And at the same time, your partner completes their assessment of you, how they see their under number 1, your ability to read and understand the impact of your emotions on your work performance. They're rating you as well as the fact that you rated yourself. Again, on a scale of 1 to 10. That's the partner assessment of you. So at the end, you will have your own assessment and your partner's assessment of you. And they also are doing the same thing. They also are doing their own self-assessment here, and you then are acting as the partner to assess them. So it's good to have a trusted partner, someone who knows you and someone who sees you in the workplace on a daily basis and can give you an assessment as well. So each of you then gets your own assessment and the assessment of the other person. And then you can sit down and work through comparing how you've rated yourself and how your partner has rated you under each heading. And generally, for most of them, the ratings might not be very different. If someone has rated you a 7, you might have rated yourself a 6. That's not a significant difference. And the only time to really pick up on it is if there's a big difference between how you're rating yourself and how your partner is rating you. Particularly if they're rating you lower than how you're seeing yourself, by maybe 2 or 3 points lower, that might be something that you decide you want to work on. And your partner also will be picking up on any differences between how they see themselves and how you have rated them as well. You may want to have some conversation then with your partner afterwards about the areas of bigger difference, why they might have rated you much lower, for instance, on level of emotional self-control than you have rated yourself. If you've given yourself a 7, they've given yourself a 3, it's quite a big difference. And to talk about it with them and find out why they've rated you a bit lower there might be interesting and give you some direction in terms of what you want to do to transform that or raise that level of emotional self-control going forward. So you might end up with, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 areas that you want to work on to improve your emotional intelligence and give yourself higher ratings in the future. And then because you've got a trusted partner in the process, this is somebody who can give you feedback going forward, both informally in the workplace, where you can ask them, how do you think I'm doing on my level of emotional self-control, for example? And then at some point you might want to redo the inventory with them to see what has changed over time. So that's the process of working with the inventory. Not just to do it alone, but to do it with a partner. both of you assessing yourself and each of you assessing the other person as well, so that it's a two-way process. I think I've gone through it twice. I think it's fairly clear. The directions are at the beginning. Choose somebody you know well and who you trust, and then work through the inventory with them. You would obviously have to introduce the idea of emotional intelligence with them if they haven't explored it before. But generally, it would be something that people, I think, would be interested in supporting you with, and also getting feedback on their own emotional intelligence. So that's the inventory, the EQ inventory. And it can be a lot of fun as well. Don't take it too seriously. Nobody's trying to put you in a box. It's about supporting each other in a trusted context to find some good things to work on and develop some good plans. So just checking again, any questions, any thoughts about it? Does it feel good, something you'd all like to do? You can give me a thumbs up, thumbs down. No wonder you're happy to try it. Tibetsi. Tibetsi, I just want to go back to the question you put in the chat again. Your question, any thoughts about the balance, being able to control your emotions, self-regulate, letting yourself feel your emotions so that you don't bypass the process? That's a really important question, because being aware of your own emotions is also recognizing that you need time and space sometimes to process things, and sometimes things can happen at work, and simply burying it is not a good idea. So if something difficult or challenging has happened, then sometimes it's important to be able to say something has happened, or to acknowledge it in the workplace, and then say, I mean, for instance, I can give you an example of someone who had to share a cancer diagnosis that came to them in the workplace. And they obviously needed some time out to process it, and it was an emotionally challenging situation. I think it's important to be able to say, look, something has just happened. I've got to deal with a very difficult situation. You might share with some people what it is, and say, I'm going to need some time out to cope with this situation. I think just to ignore and bury things is not a healthy situation. And if you're in a workplace that is not tolerant of people being able to share situations, it can be really difficult. But there may be a colleague, again, a trust colleague or somebody that you can share with in the workplace. And it's important to take that opportunity if you can, and never to bury things completely that might be going on and that might be difficult. Tibatse, does that help? In other words, not to totally bypass the process, which is your concern. Yeah, okay. You know, there is an old-fashioned view that the workplace should not be a place where people express emotion. And I think that is, well, as I say, I think it's an old-fashioned idea. And as I said earlier, we do carry things with us. We carry traumas, we carry emotional challenges that we face. And we don't leave them at the doorway to the workplace. So although we are not in a situation where we want to totally disrupt everything that happens at work because we are in an emotional state or carrying trauma, nonetheless, it's important to have workplaces that acknowledge the fact that many of us do carry issues or carry traumas, and that sometimes these can be triggered almost randomly or unexpectedly. And for workplaces to have space and time for people to be able to process that is important, as we also enable work to continue, because that's what we're there for. These are difficult issues for some people to cope with, particularly people who've been brought up, as maybe I was, on old-fashioned ideas about keeping things separate, and your emotional life should stay out here and your work life is here. It's not like that anymore in the world of work. Yeah, thoughts? Any questions about what I'm saying?
If I can just make a comment, Mark,
Yes, naturally.
just from my side, in terms of the industry we're working in, also, it's
Yeah, it can
often
be
your
hard.
emotional your EQ is put on the back burner
Yeah,
many times, and people's, how, your team is feeling and how everyone is actually doing is not an immediate concern. So it's very
yeah.
important, these conversations to be having, definitely, I think. And yeah, I'm appreciative of everyone joining today, and I hope we can, spread the message a little bit further. Just I just know the mining industry in particular, that happens in every industry, but especially in ours.
Yeah, it can be seen and almost sometimes valued by some of our older colleagues as being a tough environment where we have to be out in the field and getting on with the technical work at hand, and there's no time and space for some of the things we're talking about. So it can be a bit like that, and probably the very people who want to bury it, or who don't want to have any kind of emotional engagement with colleagues, are the very people who might be burying things, to about say, that we talked about earlier. They're the very people who we need to connect with, actually, and find out how they are as people and how they're doing. So just because the culture is in a certain way does not mean that we have to accept it, and that we can also reach out to the very people who may find it difficult to express emotion sometimes, and just ask how they're doing. Even that can make sometimes a big difference. Sometimes the very people who seem to be the toughest or have the toughest exteriors are the ones who we really need to kind of connect with on a more emotional level sometimes, and get to know them as they really are. Because otherwise we go through life carrying this facade or this image with us because we think it's right, and it's because of how we were brought up, and not to express emotion and all that kind of thing. Means that we are acting a lot of the time, and we're not really being our own selves, which is sad. So I spoke right at the beginning about the importance of emotional intelligence for living a happier, more connected, healthier, less stressed, successful lives. And this is very much a part of it, this kind of emotional intelligence, because the people who bury their own emotions, or who can't easily connect with their own feelings about situations, they can sometimes be successful, but they are living stressed, inauthentic lives in some ways. They may look perfect from the outside, but inside people can be stressed and very unhappy. So thanks for mentioning that, Natalie. Don't accept it. I think that's what I'm saying. And critically, perhaps the big thing about emotional intelligence, the big takeaway perhaps, is not to be alone. Don't be alone in your work. even if you just have a small number or a couple of good trusted colleagues around you that you can connect with about things that are important. And very often they're the things that are not at work, but the things that are important is incredibly valuable. That this business about being happier and healthier is fundamentally about not being alone, because being alone also leads to stress. It leads to stress, and stress, as we know, is one of the big killers. Yeah, thanks, Natalie. Any other questions about that? You may sometimes have heard people tell you that it's better to leave your emotions behind when you're in the workplace. And I think that's a mistake, and I wouldn't step into that too much. I think, as we said earlier, you don't want to bring every single emotion into the workplace every single day. Nothing would ever get done. But we are emotional beings, and we can't ignore that, and the fact that sometimes it will have an impact on the workplace and the people around us. Sometimes somebody does win the comrades. Somebody sometimes has bad news. And the critical thing is not to ignore these life events that can happen in the workplace, because they're going to impact at some point, whether we like it or not. And sometimes it's important to make that space to celebrate, or to make that space to grieve, or to acknowledge someone's trauma or sadness. Ultimately is going to mean a more productive and healthier workplace if we can do these things as part of it. Yeah. I think we're going to wrap it up unless there are final thoughts. Does anybody have any further questions? Okay, so Natalie, what I'm going to do is I will email you and Nolene the inventory as we conclude now. And if you are able to email it to the people who've been here today, that would be really good, if you're happy to do that. And then each of you will have the opportunity to run through the inventory with yourself and with a colleague, and give yourself some thinking to do about your own levels of emotional intelligence. Is that okay, Natalie?
Absolutely fine, Mark.
You'll be able to get the names of everybody who's been here.
Yes, I should be.
Yeah, or take a screenshot or something like that.
No, we definitely have them on record. I think I'll just need to speak to
Okay.
Craig or Lali, but all good, should be fine.
All right, well, listen, thanks very much then to all of you for being here today, and I've enjoyed engaging with you, and good luck with this.
Thanks so much, Mark, on behalf of the GSSA. We really appreciate your time, and we hope you keep coming back.
Yeah, thanks very much, everyone. Thanks, Musa. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, Spongisipo, Dion. Thanks, everyone.
I will end the meeting now. Thank you.
Great.